Greetings and salutations from the frigid white north. Rarjay here with you for another King of Fighters 98 Ultimate Match Online video. Today I want to get into a subject that I've been wanting to get into for quite a while, and I like it. It's one of my favorite aspects of the game. It's team building and team synergy. And I got a couple of different takes on it. I hope you guys enjoy it. It might get a little long, but hopefully by the end of it, you might decide it was worth it. So, getting into it, normally with our teams, we have three classifications of characters: DPS, tank, and gank. Right? I don't really feel that these roles specifically mean a whole lot, and I'll get into that in a second. I used to be an MMO player, and so I kind of think of things in three different roles: damage, tank, and support. And support to me means something very different in this game. It does not mean that the guy is a healer, right? Or I'm not talking about support like aid over here with Kenso. I'm talking about like the two guys on my team right now that are primarily filling the support position are Ash and Tengu. And I'll get into why I classify them as such right now, but that doesn't mean it's their permanent role. But anyhow, let's get into what I'm talking about here. First up, I want to talk about the damage dealers. Damage dealers like to kill things. They're gonna just murder people for you, and that's all you want them to do. You focus all of your best attack runes, your best attack historics. Even right now, we have one fight soul that's pretty good for attackers, and it's the unyielding fight soul. So you wanna make sure you pump up these guys as much as you can with their attack stat. You want to bloat it because they need to absolutely shred whatever's in front of them. The one downfall that a damage dealer can fall into is the glass cannon type, and that's basically somebody that can do a whole lot of damage, but if they take a couple hits, they're gonna die, right? But with the damage dealers, you generally want 2 to 3 of them on your team. Three being, pretty ideal. And I mean, let's just look at my team for a second. And I got to use my team for reference because I'm most familiar with my team. But I'm just trying to use it as an example, right? So when I go into my formation, you look at my back row, and I have Robert, Flame Keo, and Nightmare Geese, and all three, I have them set up as damage dealers. If these guys go down on me during the match, especially Nightmare Geese, if he goes down early, my match is usually over. I'm going to take the L. It's a big loss. But, the reason, I have Nightmare Geese set up this way, 277 attack stat. Even the runes, I'm throwing as much damage at somebody as I possibly can. Even with this, he's going to ultimate first turn. Me, myself, I have pretty good priority, so he's the only guy with the Bear Soul on my team, so he is always going to be getting this additional 30% damage on the first turn. It can come into effect later, but he's set up to just jump in the match, and if he doesn't kill somebody, he's going to take them really near death, right? And then I got my Flame Keo over here, 273k attack stat, but the way I'm doing it, I'm using a Thorns rune, and I'm using a Protection rune, but the reason being, these are the two runes that have attack stats on them, right? And even down here, the killing makes sense, right? Even still, it's not ideal on Flame Keo. I prefer to have something that goes on round 2, but I got to use what I have. Sorry. But the whole point is that for the 3 attack stat slots on the rune, I have them at red, and they're maxed out. And that it just brings his attack stat way higher than if I tried to just use a full-on orange set of runes. I want him to deal as much damage as he can. And then I have Robert, who unfortunately he kind of falls into the glass cannon territory with his health level. Like, I mean, look at that health. You know, you go over to Flame Keo, he's almost got like 200,000 more health than him, and even Nightmare Geese. You know, so Robert can't take a ton of hits, and it's not for a lack of trying. I mean, I got a couple of red runes on him. They're not the best for defense, but I'm kind of sacrificing defense in the name of having him do as much damage as possible, right? But he does kind of fall into the glass cannon range. It's okay to have one of these guys on your team. You definitely don't want to have two glass cannons, because your back line will drop. He's very susceptible to being hit by Nightmare Geese and being killed. So you know, you don't want to have too many of these guys sitting around, but he does his job extremely well. When he gets his ultimates off, they do huge damage, right? So that's kind of, it's straightforward, you know, and it's understandable, but it doesn't necessarily mean DPS character or gank character, right? I can't think of too many tanks that would actually be able to go into the damage dealer role, but it's mainly DPS and gank characters. But again, I like to classify them specifically because it's not so much about what the class is, it's about how you're equipping them, right? And then we're going to go into tanks, right? I understand it's straightforward, but at the same time, it is a classification. You know, you want them to absolutely absorb as much damage as possible. You want your tanks to have a good defensive buff in their kit, so they can, you know, increase their own defensive capabilities. If your tank has some form of crowd control on them, all the better. Oh my goodness, you know, and that's why I actually really like the new Mr. Karate, because he'll, you know, I have him at S max, but with his ultimate, you know, he will increase his own resistance rate. This is wrong. They have this wrong. He doesn't increase his own 30. He increases his own 30% resistance rate. And he absorbs 300 rage from whoever he hits, right? So I mean, it's really good for them to have that. But the fact that he can reduce rage, he can essentially lock down a character with his rage absorb, right? So he's sitting front line. He's going to absorb 300 rage after he does his ultimate. He gets hit a couple times. He can ult back-to-back rounds. It's possible, right? So he definitely is one of my favorite tanks at the moment. But, you know, we're going to have other tanks upcoming. There's a lot of other great tanks available now. But, you know, there's something that can be said about a really good tank in this game. You know, I like Omega Rugal comes to mind when he came out. Omega Rugal was like game-changing when people had him all buffed out and he could revive, and like, he had some lasting power. You know, you want to pick tanks that have some good lasting power, like Elizabeth right now. The way she fires out those shields, and with her S-Max, people are getting that now. She can regain health on her own shield. Those shields are so good for defense. And you can't write off defense in this game. You know, you want to have a good, solid defense. It protects your damage dealers, right? If you go in with all pure damage dealers, you're basically playing the game of who can kill the other guy fastest. But as soon as you run into a solid tank that can take 2, 3, 4 ultimates, it's going to shut your team down. You know, it's honestly the way it goes. You know, we're getting into like Wild Bear Soul era stuff with pure damage dealers and ultimates in the first round, talking about that, and it can still work these days, but it's best to diversify, you know. So you usually want at least one really good tank on your team. It's nice to have a second. So me personally, with my own team, I'm going to be trying to go for Oswald. I think he's just a really great overpowered tank, but he does have some real staying ability. He's going to stay on the field for a long time, and then it moves in. I'm going to move into the next one, and that would be the support. And this is kind of where it's like, what you talking about? And support characters are the characters that you want to bring into the match because they're bringing buffs to your team, or they're debuffing the enemy, and they help synergize with the rest of your team. If they have crowd control abilities on them, wonderful. Sometimes that's what you want. You want support characters that specifically crowd control. But in a general sense, you're going to have your supports sitting on your front row with your tanks. Those back row spots, I wouldn't suggest giving up more than one to a support type character, and that's only if they are like really, really good, and they can turn the tide of the battle, right? There's not too many of those types out there. A really amazing support / tank character that's coming up is Tung Fu Ru, and I mean, he's got support written all over him, the way he supports the team, with the disciple abilities. I'm gonna make an introduction video when they release him on global. I think that should be later tonight, actually, but I'll get into that later. But anyways, these support guys, they can be any type of fighter, DPS, gank, tank, it's all in the way you equip the characters. And now that I've got those three things covered, I just want us to all be on the same page when I'm talking about the different characters here, using these terms damage, tank, and support, so you know exactly what I'm talking about. And you're not just going, what do you mean? What do you mean? No, I want it to be clear, right? Because this goes into team synergy afterwards, right? So when we're building our team, when I look at my team right now, I've got my 3 damage dealers in the back, I've got my 1 tank in New Mr. Karate, and I've got my 2 supports in Ash and Tengu. And I'm sorry, I know if it sounds blasphemous that I'm using Tengu as a support, whatever, I have plans to switch him around, basically doing that later in the future, right? Because some of these characters are so good that depending on the way you equip them with fight souls, historics, and runes, they can absolutely change position. It's not that Tengu is, I'm calling Tengu specifically a support, it's just he can fill multiple roles just depending on how you have him set up, right? So, right now, I want him on the front line. I still want to have him do some damage, right? Like, he can still hit like 2 million damage ults, but because I don't have his S-Max right now, I find that it's usually Geese is going to do more on my team. Once Tengu has his S-Max, I can use him in a different way, right? Currently, I have Boiling Blood runes on him. If I want him to be an absolute damage dealer, I've got the runes saved, right? I want Dragon Tiger on him because he does the explode at the end. With his X-Max, he does that, he can blow up everybody, and, you want that, I want that slash effect on him, so that if he ever does go and smash somebody that's low health, it's going to be doing an extra 30% damage, and that's going to blow up their team even harder, right? But I'm not using him as a damage dealer right now. I'm using him as a support. And what makes a character a support, right? It's pretty easy to talk about Ash, because he's been in a supporting role on my team for a long time. One of the main things that he brings to the battle is he's going to decrease all enemy attack by a certain percentage, right? 15.6% here at level 113. Starts out at 10% at level 1, I believe. But you absolutely need one of these attack reducers on your team. There's only certain characters that'll do it, but it is absolutely essential to try to include one of the attack reducers on your team, because, put it this way, if you don't have an attack reducer and they do, it means you're doing 15.6% less damage, and they're actually, by you not having it, going to be doing 15.6% more damage to you, right? It makes a 30% damage differential in how much damage you're taking and dealing out, right? So you want to make everything even. It's a very, very, very strong ability, and if you drop it, it's a really hard thing to live without. But then on top of that, Ash has this heal in his passive, right? This is with Gates, and he recovers 25% HP up to 4 times per battle. I think it's 20% and 3 times per battle without the S max. I don't remember exactly. But the point is, he heals, right, multiple times, and that, 4 times 25, he'll heal for his full amount of life, if he doesn't get bursted down. But then on top of that, every time a heal goes off, he clears all his debuffs, right? So that is a pretty big thing as well. And then I took him to S max because, again, it's a support thing where he can steal block rate from the front row and crit rate from the back row. And if there's only one fighter, he steals both. And then on top of that, anybody that gets hit with his flame effect, I know there's a lot of burn immune right now, but for the ones that still can be hit with the flame effect, they're going to be having a nice healthy 15% decrease to their ultimate damage, right? So he is bringing a lot of support to the team in defensive buffs. And then the way I have him set up is with these mountain, I guess, Earth's Heart runes. I call them mountain because, hey, it's a mountain, right? But with Earth's Heart, anybody that hits him is going to have their attack reduced, right? What is it? At orange level, it's 16% attack. I mean, that's a pretty... That's like his passive right there. Another 16% attack on top of that 15.6, I think it was, percent. And then if he's killed during a burst round with the runes, right, it's going to reduce all enemies' attack and resistance rate for a round. So, he is the way I have him set up, he's very defensive oriented. He can still do a little bit of damage, right? Everybody can still do damage, but even with his historics, I have them set up, so that he's going to take less damage. So he can sit there, he can take a bunch of hits. He's going to heal himself, drops everybody's, attack. Like, it's support, right? He's not there to do damage, and I really do expect him to die faster than new Mr. Karate, right? And then even with Tengu, the way I'm using him right now, he's bringing support because I'm using the Karate Kids, and he increases their ultimate damage by 41.8%. Including his own, obviously, but that is a very strong support ability. Not too many characters get to enjoy this boosted damage from somebody else's passive. You got your female teams; they can get a boost through I think Shermie's ult and Athena 2K's ult. They'll get an attack boost. Flame teams with Neskio. He gives flame fighters bonus ultimate damage, and then the karate guys with Takuma or Tengu, they increase karate fight. So it's pretty small in scope. How rare these types of buffs are for a team. So I'm gonna run with it because I like it, But then on top of that, he can resist death. I'm sure we're all fairly familiar with his resist. He with his gates, he gains a bit of health back, and then he still has to be hit into death 3 times before he permanently dies. So normally he'll stay alive for an additional round, right? So he's buying my backline fighters some time. But he's also got this insane reflect, and when I combo it with new Mr. Karate's passive, he can get 70% damage reflection just by using his skill. Which is actually ridiculously high. When people are hitting him, they are losing a lot more life than they're gaining, even with their lifesteal. And he can put a little bit of damage, right? But the whole idea behind using the blood runes, I feel that they're more of a supporting rune because they don't add, you do get the normal damage burst, but they're more focused on lifesteal, right? When HP is below 50%, get an additional 30% HP drain. That works out perfectly with his fight ghost ability, where he's going to be under 50% health, usually when that goes off, and he's gonna get himself like 50-60% life drain and heal himself right back up to full. But if I wanted to use him in a more damaging capability, then I would definitely put Dragon Tiger on him, or maybe even God's Wrath. But both of those sets are more damage oriented, where this is more of a, I'm going to keep healing sort of a thing. And that's kind of the idea behind keeping him on the front line. He's going to go down, he's going to heal back up with his ultimate, he's going to cause a bunch of reflect damage, he boosts damage, he's saving my back row for at least a turn normally, or sometimes he takes a Nightmare Geese ult and activates Fight Ghost and doesn't die. It's a huge buff to have this guy not dying on the front row, and I'm pretty sure even my historics, yeah, I have him set up as pretty much a tank, right? So your supports on the front row, the idea is so that they stay alive long enough to do what it is that they're there to do. Oh, what's the other thing that he does? He reduces everybody's crit or something like that. Yeah, reduce all enemies 16% crit effect doubled. So he's bringing different buffs and debuffs to your team that are very, very essential to my formation anyways. But then, you have somebody like Nightmare Geese, where he can be used front row or back row. I mean, this guy has, versatility written all over him. With his anti-crit, you throw him on the front row, you can use him. Like, look at these stats, man. This HP, this defense. He trumps my actual tank, with his stat lines. And if I throw him into my front row, it's going to get a little bit better. But he's probably not dying very fast unless he takes multiple ultimates in a row, or the whole team decides to focus fire him in a round. But it's an RNG game, like in that regard. But I've seen a lot of people throw him front row, and he's very, very effective as a front row, damage dealer or support even. His Nightmare debuff, huge. It wins matches, that Nightmare debuff. So I mean, you can use him however you want to use him, but the whole idea and my whole point of what I'm trying to get to here is you need to think about what role the characters that you have are going to fill, and that's even more so important when you're thinking of future characters that you're going to get. Maybe you just have a random collection of API 15 bosses right now. You might have a little bit of synergy going on between them, but going forward, you should think about what specific role this character is going to fill on your team. What buffs are they going to bring to your team? How well does it mesh into what you already got going on your team, right? And that's where my next point comes in about team synergy. And I mean, the easiest way to describe team synergy is to look at the Karate Kids. The whole reason, and in my opinion, these guys are the absolute best API 14 characters in the game. There's a couple other characters that kind of come close, but these guys absolutely take the cake for API 14 bosses, and it's a huge buff. It's a huge benefit, I should say, to have a couple of API 14s on your team that can still do work, because they're cheaper to upgrade, their S-Max is easier to come by. It's just, it's nice to have some completed characters on your team that, you don't have to immediately replace, right? So, I mean, but what makes these guys' synergy so good is the fact that whenever one of them ultimates, they, at S-Max anyways, they will dispel their own debuffs, and they also dispel the other guy's debuffs. So, new Mr. Karate will dispel Robert 2002's debuffs. And so, say Robert gets silenced, it's like, oh no, my Flame Kyo isn't able to ultimate and clear that this round. Well, if Mr. Karate ultimates, it's cleared, and then Robert can do his thing, and vice versa, right? And then if one of them dies, the other one gets some type of buff. They gain some life. They gain a buff, and they also go to full rage. You know, so these guys work really, really, really well together. But then on top of that, you know, Robert 2002 with his passive, it doesn't show for some reason. Their gates are all screwed up, but he adds 20% lifesteal to your back row, and Mr. Karate, he adds 20% damage reflect to your front row. So they're assisting your entire team with their team-wide buffs, right? So that's what I'm talking about with synergy. Guys that are going to work together, right? There's certain characters out there that are very, very selfish, and they don't buff your team, they only buff themselves, and they're not really team players. Nobody's coming to mind right now. Like, I'm pretty sure Saki. Sorry to pick on the new kid, but Saki, he honestly, he's a selfish fighter. He does everything for himself. You know, he increases his own damage and damage resistance and nether souls and blah blah blah. But you know, his one saving grace is he does increase the flame damage. But I'm pretty sure that is all he will really do for your team. He doesn't buff anybody in any other way. He only really buffs himself. You know, so he's kind of a selfish fighter, and that's what I'm talking about. Yeah, you know, and beyond that, you know, there's a few other fighters that, you know, fall into the direct support role that I can think of right here. One of the characters that's actually like really good at supporting is Mukai. I mean, this guy, he doesn't make a very good tank. If you boost his damage to infinity and beyond, he's not gonna pump out those huge numbers because he's like an AoE CC guy, right? But his kit kind of allows him to sit on the front row. He's got that guaranteed resurrect, and after gates, you know, he's pretty hard to kill in his rock form, and he's going to come back and he's going to throw out another ultimate and hopefully petrify some people for you, you know. But to me, that puts him in like a crowd control support role, you know. But so he is, especially at this point in the game, in my opinion, going to be sitting on your front line if you're using him. So, you know, he's taking up a tank spot, and you can't really call him damage at that point, you know. So really, you know, slap some chaos runes on him and go to town and crowd control people, right? You know, another character that comes to mind with support is, where is she? You know, Athena 2002. She's there to support she's a support for the female team. Can she do some okay damage? I guess, you know, like, you know, the #1 ranked female team on my server, he uses her, and, you know, she does a lot for the team, but as far as her damage goes, I mean, it's not that good. But, you know, she'll increase all the female allies' resistance rate, block rate, you know, she increases female attack power, she gives off that heal, and then, you know, she can get some rage back if people do ultimates. But even here, you know, her skill attack, it dispels the target, right? She takes away your buffs if she hits you with it. So she can help to kill tanks, right? She does a lot for a female team. She's very, very good, but she's a support. You know, you jack her up with the tank runes, you know, you build her like a tank, but she never really hits that level of tankiness that some of the really good tanks can get, you know. And so I'm just trying to give you guys an idea of what I mean by support. You know, there's certain characters that you want on your team as a support. You know, e.g., some people, you know, I was even doing it at one point using e.g. It's kind of fallen off, but I mean, if you're using an e.g., he's support, man. You know, you can, you know, buff him up with all the defense runes and everything, so he doesn't get like one shot and immediately targeted by Nightmare Geese, because Nightmare Geese really killed the EG thing. But, you know, if anybody other than Nightmare Geese hits EG, great, you know, he's gonna cause that curse on them, and it really, really takes a fighter out of the match once they get hit with an Iji curse or a Magikai curse. You know, so you got to think in terms of sometimes it's good to sacrifice a bit of damage or a bit of tank ability for a very strong support character that will help your team, you know, do more of what it does best. You know, yeah, you know, and sorry, I want to get into where's the runes at? Where's the runes at? It's easiest just to go to the illustration. You know, for our damage fighters, you know, we've got our Wolf's Anger, Dragon Tiger, and the real difference between them is really Wolf's Anger is round 1, Dragon Tiger starts on round 2. Yes, they do have, you know, one is for high HP fighters that deals extra damage, one is for low HP fighters that deals extra damage. But essentially, you want to try to line up your runes with when your characters are going to ult, right? The mistake I'm doing right now on Flame Kyo, he normally goes off on round 2, right? But because, you know, what am I going to do? Lower his attack stat just to have that little bit of extra damage? I don't know. I mean, you know, because I do have that. You know, these are the decisions you got to make over time. I do have the Dragon Tiger rune sitting around. I got a few other orange, so I could, you know, trade some in. But I mean, I like where he's at. I like the amount of damage potential that he has. He does really, really well on my team if he survives. But you know, you want to try to line those up as best as you can with what you have. Sometimes, like with my Flame Coyote, you get what you have. You know, but those are two really good sets. And then, you know, again, we have our Killing Soul and our God's Wrath. And again, Killing Soul's round 1, God's Wrath is round 2. You know, they both essentially do the same thing. There's not as much of a difference in their abilities. One is if crit, one is if blocked. You know, if your attack's blocked, you get stuff. If you get crit, you know. But they really shine just in their 4 of 6 runes with this ability, because if you do a crit, it does a certain percent of max HP damage. So they are really amazing runes for obviously your damage dealers. But then these other ones, you know, Boiling Blood, Chaos. These two specifically I find are mainly for support fighters. Chaos is a really niche rune. I find it's only effective on certain fighters that already have the control, like Kula, Mukai, Maki. I don't know anybody else. And then, you know, your Boiling Blood is more of a support rune in the sense that, you know, a guy's going to take some damage. Maybe he already has a base lifesteal and you want to give him more so that he can heal up. Because, you know, like with Tengu, for an example, if he's low health and he does an ultimate and he has the Boiling Blood effect on him and he has his Fight Ghost effect, he can heal himself from 0 to like 75% full or full life. And if he does that, you know, when he triggers a Kenso, you know, to pop out with his meat bun, that heal is not going to hit Tengu because it decides who the Kenso meat bun goes to after the ultimate effect. So if you can heal up your Tengu with his ultimate, then, you know, the Kenso can come out and eat a meat bun and give it to somebody else who can't really heal, right? So it can be good in keeping your characters alive so that they can have some self-sustainability. But then also, with your supporting characters, you can also put Earth's Heart on them, or Heart of Thorns if you want. Protector Soul, I find is really only good on tanks that actually have a block rate chance or a block rate buff, a self buff, or something that's gonna. In the Genesis era, this would have just been amazing, probably one of the best runes. But we're past that era now, with all the blocking and stuff. Genesis has taken on a different form. So these, in my opinion, are kind of the weakest of the defensive runes, only because they basically require you to be blocking, right? So they're good on certain tanks. I wouldn't put them on a support. But Heart of Thorns is great for the damage reflect, and at 6 of 6, the heal is actually really, really great. I mean, when attacked, HP recovery 20%. That's at red, but I mean, even at orange, where's the Heart of Thorns? What is it at orange? Oh, it's still HP recovery increase 20%, recover 5%. So it's 25% health. Yeah, 25% health every time you're hit with these things, and up to 6 times, right? So, I mean, that'll keep your guys going a lot longer, and on top of that, it reflects damage, right? And so if you already have somebody that is going to have a bit of damage reflect, it can add up pretty quickly, and it does do some good chipping damage, the damage reflect. And then the tanks, obviously, runes for tanks, Heart of Thorns, Protector, or the Mountain, Earth's Heart. I like to think that you should have at least one set of Earth's Heart for that damage reduction. It's really nice to have. But then, Thorns, because why not? Thorns is great, keeps your tanks alive a lot longer. And then even when you start going into the fight souls, you have to think about who's using what. You want your unyielding, especially if you can get your unyielding up to this level 4, 10% ult damage each turn, up to turn 10. That is really amazing. And then at 5-star you can get an extra 50% damage. So I mean, it's pretty good to have. Vengeance, is that Vengeance? Yeah, Vengeance isn't really all that awesome, but again, even at level 1, you basically have the EG thing going on, and it'd be good to throw on a support fighter, so when they die, something bad happens to the enemy, but then your Guardian, you could throw this on a damage dealer. My idea with level 2 here, you throw that on one of your back row guys for now, because we only have 3 fight souls, right? For now anyways. But you throw that on one of your back row guys, and all of a sudden Nightmare Geese doesn't seem so scary. You can usually pick out who Nightmare Geese goes for on your team based on the health and watching rounds and stuff like that. But you throw that on somebody and they're all of a sudden probably not dying in the first 2 rounds, and then it gets even better on round 3 and all that sort of stuff. So even though this might be like really amazing on a tank, at the same time, these things can also be used on your damage dealers to help keep them up and alive better, and also, at level 3 here, to have them avoid being the victim of crowd control. I think Flame Keo, like specifically for my team, Flame Keo would be a good candidate for that, because him not, being controlled and then also taking, a set amount of damage, it's a pretty key thing to keep him alive and keep him not crowd controlled, so he can then dispel the debuffs on the rest of the team, right? So that's kind of it. It's more so to put the thought in motion that you want to think about what fighters are doing on your team and how they're working together. You want to try to build a team with some good synergy. You want to have your guys working as a team, not all doing their own individual things. And then beyond that, you want to think about what types of buffs or debuffs against the enemy team you're bringing onto your team. I mean, I want to drop Ash so badly, but because he brings he brings that with ease with him, it's hard to get rid of. It's hard to get rid of him with this decrease all enemy attack until very specific fighters are released that also have this ability, but could also replace him on my team. So I mean, it's been difficult trying to get rid of him. You know, Tung Fu Ru, he has this ability, but at the same time, I want Oswald. I don't want Tung Fu Ru. You know, so I get put into the predicament of basically waiting for Robert XI to come out because he also has the, you know, it's hard. You know, you got to think these things out and plan your team ahead to have the best chance of gaining the best position in arena as you can, and it also helps with all your other game modes. You know, so anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this. I hope I'm, you know, I hope you can understand what I'm talking about here. You know, about the way the fighters all work together, and you know, try to avoid the selfish fighters. Um, you know, read their kits, see what they do. You know, but generally, it's best to have guys that help out the entire team instead of just themselves. It's okay to have one or two of those guys, but you definitely want to have a couple of fighters that come into the match and provide something really great for your team, or really make it hard for the other guy to kill your team, you know, or stuff like that. So anyways, guys, have a good one, and I'll see you on the next one. Peace.